What's going on, everybody? Kalipis Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be taking another look at the TCL Stylus 5G and going over whether or not it's still a good phone to buy in 2023. Now, as always, if you do end up wanting to learn more about this phone, be sure to check out the description where I will be linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the TCL Stylus 5G, we're getting a really large 6.81-inch IPS LCD display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 395, and a 20.5:9 aspect ratio. So definitely a great display here, and for what it is, I really have no complaints. The only thing that might be better is if maybe it had like an AMOLED or something like that, but considering this is a phone you can get for typically under $200, that's not really something I would expect. But the image quality in general is really good. Keep in mind, TCL primarily makes TVs, so it is to be expected that their phones would have at least decent displays, and taking a look at this, definitely really nice. So if you're doing stuff like watching videos, for example, you are going to get a real good experience. And at 6.81 inches, again, this is a really large display, and this does tend to be a good thing when you're consuming a lot of content. And with the 20.5:9 aspect ratio, we're also getting a nice tall narrow form factor. So if you're doing something like browsing the web, for example, you can fit a good amount of content on the screen without having to scroll too much. And if you're in landscape mode, doing something like watching videos, looking at photos, playing games, you're also going to get a nice immersive experience, and things are going to look a bit more cinematic. So in general, if you're looking for a more affordable phone that has a really nice display, the TCL Stylus 5G will be a great choice. Now for storage with this phone, we're getting 128GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so definitely plenty of storage here. For the average user, you probably won't even have to use a microSD card, but even if you are more of a power user, if you're always downloading new apps and games and stuff like that, the microSD card is always an option, which is actually more than you can say for most higher end devices. For security features, with this phone, we are getting Face Unlock, as well as a fingerprint scanner right here on the power key, so definitely nice to have multiple options besides a pin to unlock it. But real quick, let's give the fingerprint scanner a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, real fast and responsive, no issues at all. For the camera setup here, up front, we got a real nice looking hole punch design for the selfie camera. This camera is 13 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a quad camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. And then for video, this phone has a max recording quality of 1080p in both the rear and front cameras, so no 4K here, but considering this is a phone that even at full price goes for less than $300, I'm really not surprised. So in general, the camera setup here is really good. Feature-wise, we got pretty much everything, including an ultra-wide camera and a macro camera. So if you're someone who's taking lots of pictures and you want a wider variety of features, you're definitely not going to be disappointed here. And when it comes to photo quality, this phone is pretty good too. To give you an idea of what it can do, here's some pictures taken with the TCL Stylus 5G. And again, overall, I do think the photo quality is pretty good for what it is. Now, if you're really taking a lot of pictures and the camera is more of a main focus of your phone, then yeah, in that situation, you could probably justify spending a bit more and getting something higher end with a better camera. And then maybe if you're coming from like an older flagship phone, the photo quality here might feel like a bit of a downgrade, but honestly, for most people who are looking at a phone like this, I do think the pictures are really good. So if you're posting pictures on like Instagram, for example, or sending photos to friends and family, or maybe just taking vacation photos for your own memories, for stuff like that, the camera we're getting with this phone will get the job done just fine. Now for the RAM and processor, with the TCL Stylus 5G, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 700 processor. In general, the performance on this phone is pretty decent. It's not like the fastest phone ever, but at the same time, for typical basic activities, things people are usually using smartphones for anyway, stuff like web browsing, social media, streaming content like videos and music, and even a pretty good amount of mobile gaming, I have had a pretty good experience with this phone. So again, in general, for the average user, the performance will be just fine. Now I did run a benchmark test on this phone using Geekbench 6, and here are the results I got. So what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone and then comparing your results to these, and that's going to give you a better idea of where this phone stands performance-wise compared to your current device, because depending on what you have, it may or may not actually be a performance upgrade. If you're coming from an older flagship phone like maybe an old iPhone or a Samsung Galaxy S10, or even an S9 for that matter, then chances are this is going to be a downgrade. But if you're coming from maybe like a typical lower-end device or maybe an older mid-range phone, then there is a good chance this phone will actually be a pretty solid upgrade. But again, in general, for typical daily use, I do think this phone performs just fine, and if you are looking for more of an affordable 5G phone, you most likely won't be disappointed here. Now for the battery, with the TCL Stylus 5G, we're getting a 4000 mAh battery. This supports 18-watt fast charging, so I will say it's definitely not the best battery out there. In fact, I don't know why TCL gave this phone this battery, because honestly at this point in 2023, I want to say the vast majority of 5G phones, even around this price range, are going to have a 5000 mAh battery, and that is a pretty significant difference. That being said though, I don't think the battery life is really necessarily terrible, because in my experience, you can do a decent amount of stuff with it and still at least be okay. So if you're in a situation where maybe you're around a charger a decent amount of the time, then chances are you're going to be just fine here. But if you are in a situation where battery life is a bit more crucial, I would probably get something else. Now another pretty noticeable weakness with this phone is, unfortunately, with the software. The TCL Stylus 5G does only have Android 12, and seeing as it's been a while now, I'm pretty sure it's not going to be getting Android 13. Now I could be wrong, I can't predict the update schedule of phones like this, but at the same time, keep in mind we are about halfway through 2023 and we are on Android 13 now, and for that matter, we got like 6 months until Android 14 comes out. So I feel like Android 12 is getting pretty outdated. So if you are more concerned about the software, you're probably going to want to get something else. As far as other features go, the TCL Stylus 5G does have NFC, so if you like to use tap and pay, you won't have to worry about that here. And of course, as you can probably tell by the name, we also do get a stylus here. Now, on one hand, this is definitely not the world's best stylus, but for things like handwritten notes and navigating through your display, it does get the job done. It's decently responsive. I don't know that it's necessarily better than like Motorola's stylus, but at the same time, if you are looking for a really affordable phone that has this feature, I feel like just based on price versus functionality, the TCL Stylus 5G is probably your best option. The Moto G Stylus is okay, definitely a great phone, and honestly I feel like the Stylus 5G 2022 at least is actually a bit better than this phone in most ways, but at the same time it's also a bit more expensive. So in general, if you are looking for a more affordable phone that has a stylus that works decently well, then this phone is definitely a good choice. But in conclusion, is the TCL Stylus 5G still worth buying in 2023? In general, I feel like the only reason I would potentially say no is that, again, this phone only has Android 12 and it's pretty doubtful that it's going to get Android 13, and at this point, seeing that we're getting closer and closer to Android 14 as time goes on, I would personally rather have a phone that has much better software support. Now honestly, the Moto G Stylus 5G is really not that much better, but I would say it is at least better than this. So if you do care about the software, definitely keep this in mind. But aside from this, the phone has a great display, pretty good performance, a really nice camera that takes decent pictures, a good amount of storage, and it does have NFC too, so you can use tap and pay. So in general, if you are looking for an affordable 5G phone with a stylus, and you're not too concerned about the software, then even at this point in 2023, I do think the TCL Stylus 5G is still worth considering. Now once again, if you want to learn more about this phone, definitely check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalippa's Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.